Hello and welcome to a Sonic Lab special. It's continuing our kind of Steinberg Cubase series, mini-series that we're doing. But this time we've got Andy from Steinberg who's come over to show us the brand new drum sequencer, sampler, Groove Agent 4.
All of that, yeah, Groove Agent 4. It's exciting stuff, just out.
Yeah, give us a lowdown.
Okay, well, I mean, you kind of summed it up there, but it is, of course, a drum program device. It's a wave player, it's a drum sampler, and of course, it's a standalone AU and VST.
Right. So yes, so it'll work as a standalone and presumably PC and Mac.
PC and Mac, yes.
Right. Okay.
True.
So Groove Agent's been around for many years, really, and this is version 4. So what's new?
Okay, so, well, I mean, if the people that will have used more recent versions of Groove Agent will recognize the interface. You can see we've got the pads on the left-hand side.
It's very similar to Groove Agent SE, which
yeah.
comes built in with Cubase.
Yep. So there's not a steep learning curve there for people that have used it before, but the main difference, I mean, as you yourself pointed out, as soon as you saw it, are the 4 different beat agents across the top.
Yeah. So, what is the concept of a beat agent then?
Okay, well, a beat agent is basically what Groove Agent was.
Right.
So it's an old school, not so old school, but it is really based on an old school drum machine.
Drum machine. Okay.
To a certain extent, but then of course we can do so much more of it, more with it, and you can see we've got 4 of them along the top.
So. Yeah. So you've got 4 slots, but each of those slots can be a different agent.
Of course.
Yeah. So what are the agents?
What's an agent?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a secret international spy agent, but no, it is basically 4 different drummers inside of the one drum machine.
Okay.
So when I say drummers, of course, we're talking different patterns, different types of sounds, and different things that we can actually do to affect those sounds.
Okay. Can we hear something?
Of course. Well, let's maybe have a look at the different types of agents to start with.
Okay.
So you can see we've got all agents, so we can choose between all of them, and then we've got 3 different acoustic drum kits. So we've got a rock kit, studio kit, vintage kit, and then we've got the more electronic, hip-hop, well, you know, something for the cool kids. So we can interchange any of these. So when you say, can we hear something?
Yeah.
Let's go vintage. Is that okay with you?
That's great with me.
That's pretty well with me. Okay, so Ringo Sons, let's load this up. Name's fairly indicative of what it's perhaps going to sound like.
Is that Zach and Jay?
No idea. So here you can see, as was the case in Groove Agent, we've got our pads. So go down, you've got lower velocity. The higher you go, the higher the velocity is. But one of the biggest differences inside of our Groove Agent 4 now is the new pattern bank. So you can see we've got 16 different patterns, but as we move through, we can have any number of interchangeable patterns. So we can create our own, or we can use the patterns that come as standard with the package.
Okay.
Yeah, so of course if you want to hear it, you can swap in between patterns. Play the patterns using the keyboard, or triggers, so pads, even an electronic drummer can actually have this hooked up, and then you can see down the bottom there we've actually got we've got an electronic drum input map, so you can use any one of a number of different electronic drum kits.
So these drums, they sound like multi-sampled, sort of proper, really well recorded.
Of course, yeah. So I mean that's one of the big differences between, say, other versions of Groove Agent and this Groove Agent is we have taken painstaking care to actually sample, nice kits in nice rooms with really good engineers who know what they're doing.
So I suppose this is kind of now, we can see it becoming a little bit like a fusion between like something like a BFD or an easy drummer or superior drummer with maybe like a machine kind of thing.
That's a nice
in the middle.
Nice example, because I guess everyone's looking at the market and thinking, well, there's already been 3 of those for quite some time. So what was our purpose in actually trying to enter that type of market, which is interesting because, of course, if we go across to say something like let me just go to my kit here. There you go. You can see we've got the drum kit.
Nice.
So we've got all the parameters that you would expect with your typical drum player, acoustic drum player. So we've got snare kick, toms. We can change in between A and B, so get different types of snares.
Yeah. Can we have a listen to something?
Yeah, sure. So things like if I click on the snare, I mean, if I want that big British sound, I can move the overhead. I can move the room up so there's lots of bleed. If I want a more American sound, I can go a lot closer. And then, I mean, you pointed out earlier, there's a transient designer over the top of it. So you can see we can change the various elements. We can change the whole kit if we wanted to say hit shift and select everything. So if we wanted to make it a roomier sound,
So
you
that will
highlight
select
everything and change everything.
Okay,
of course.
great. So the yellow ring that's around the snare, then the information along the bottom is
specific to that kit. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's interesting. So you can have a snare with a a longer attack on it and a kick that's sort of in your face. So you can interchange any of those.
So you could have like your acoustic kit there in the slot 1. Into slot 2, we could like load in like maybe an 808 or some sort of electronic drum.
Absolutely, and that would blend the sound.
Right.
Okay, so as we add on to different types of kits, of course we can just have the kick active from say Beat Agent 2 if we wanted to. So we could click on it and come through and say load. Once again, go to our media bay and say, well, in Beat Agent 2, let's go down here to this kit. Maybe experimental's we're not ready for that, are we? It's too early in the morning. Anyway, if we find something, let's say Fire and Ice. So we load that up and now you can see we've got electronic elements, which will now, you'll see they'll start merging in with the actual pattern that's playing from Ringo's Sons.
Right.
So that's where it starts. It could seem a little bit confusing because, of course, that one pattern's firing off all 4 different agents. And I said earlier, it's almost like you've got 4 different players. So if we now went into, say, Fire and Ice, which is a preset for our different kit, and we said, edit, let's go to our pattern overview. Now you can see we've got 2 pattern banks.
Oh, the 2 pattern banks, right.
Yeah. So each one of these patterns represents a block on the screen.
So it'll play all 4 patterns,
yeah,
all 4 slots.
So you can see now it's playing 2 patterns at once.
Right.
Highly, I guess, overwhelming to a certain extent. But if we wanted to change that, we can just click on any one of these now and go back to the media bay.
Yeah.
And then load another pattern.
And is that yellow light off then means that it's muted if you were to trigger that one?
On that one particular bank.
Great. So there's a percussion agent, I believe.
There is a percussion agent.
Now that's quite exciting to me.
Come over here and click on load. We go back to our media bay.
Yeah.
And then you can see the percussion agent.
Great. And this is all like your kind of regular congas, tambourines, shakers.
It's basically everything you would expect to see if a percussion player was there on stage with you.
And lots of different patterns for controlling that.
Lots of really tasty patterns. So everything from, say, contemporary percussion through to some of, something you'd expect to hear on, say, a Steely Dan album or something like that. Okay, that's a big call because, of course, we're in Groove Agent 4, which is a electronic drum machine. But of course, we can change parameters like swing, feel, all that sort of stuff. And of course, we can program things out ourselves,
right? And
drag and drop.
And you've got like full sequencing actually inside of this as well.
You do, yeah. In terms of the standalone, yeah, of course. So we can go through and you can see there's a pattern there. So if we wanted to, we could get our tool and. So
all the patterns that like your preset patterns, they're all editable then.
Of course, yeah.
Fantastic.
And we're on the standalone, I guess the standalone instance here. Yeah. But as soon as we move inside a DAW and software, then it takes on a complete new entity, I guess, or a complete new personality in terms of what you can and can't do. Okay, so you can see we've got the various elements here.
So similar to the way the drums were laid out.
But. And as before, you've got room, tune, attack, and transients on each individual instrument. But let's say we want to mix them. So you can see, if you have a look, I've got Ringo Sons going with the percussion agent on the right-hand side. Okay. Kind of a random pattern. So to start with, it's quite full on. You're not really going to use that I guess underneath the track with other things going on. So if we wanted to, we could come in and we could interchange the patterns. Okay, so you can see we've got hundreds of MIDI files or MIDI patterns that we can work with. But even if that's maybe you're just struggling to get something that really fits, because maybe the original beat that we're using over in say Ringo Sons is just a little bit too elaborate. So this will be pleasing to original Groove Agent fans. If we click on this, go back to Ringo Sons. And then hit edit, you can see now we've got this
complexity. And this is the Groove Agent legacy in a way.
Yeah, so for old school users, they'll be used to seeing this particular type, I guess, graphical interface, which makes it easy because if we just want to change one of these pads, at the moment that's a main pad, but maybe we want that to be an intro, so we just and then the next one we might want to be a groove. So now we're going from the intro.
Yeah.
I mean, if I set that to change on the bar, and of course I didn't, But hey, it's live, so it's all right. Okay, so yeah, and then you can see that if I wanted to very quickly build a song up from start to finish, then I could say intro, or maybe
all the different components of a song.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Great.
And then change the complexity. So, and do things like say, well, I don't want crash in that particular groove.
Great.
And then things like move tip to the shank, and then you've got no bell for the ride, and then quantize swing. So everything is pretty much interchangeable, from the drum kits to the patterns to different styles of patterns to different components of patterns.
Right. So by being able to take the preset patterns, bringing them in, and then playing around with these controls, you're essentially taking however many patterns are in there, hundreds of patterns, but making those hundreds of patterns infinitely variable. Infinitely variable
with diverse sounds as well. So another useful thing, I guess, in terms of the standalone application, and it's not specific to the standalone application, but it's this jam function here. So if we click on this, you can see we've got a transport function. So if we click on different elements, you can see it's continuously playing, and then it'll move from one element to the other element.
Right.
Phil.
Oh, and why is that different from the global play?
I guess it's different because you can see we've got, let me just stop that, you can see we've got a number of bars, so it'll tell you how many times it's actually going to play for. So it might be a particular progression. So the thing about the jam element would also be, if we're playing, if you're playing live and you want to, say, do the solo again or something like that, you could just trigger it straight off. And in one bar, it will change to that.
So a little bit like the session view in Ableton Live in the way that
very much so.
that can be sort of non-linear sort of way that it can move between
definitely.
patterns.
This will actually end up being a really handy feature, I think, for drummers who are triggering loops live.
Right.
And need that element of being able to, adjust on the move or be flexible depending on what's going on with the actual vibe in the live setting.
Okay, so we haven't looked at the mixer functionality within the standalone, but presumably you've got quite comprehensive mixer function.
So the mixer, I guess you say comprehensive, remembering we've got 4 different players or four different agents. So
and each of those agents could all be different acoustic kits.
Of course,
So we could be talking about lots of channels.
Yep, lots of channels, and I guess lots of ways we can edit the sound within those specific channels. So we might want to say, have our kick drum, our acoustic kick drum a particular way, but then go into Beat Agent, load up an electronic kit. So let's say number 1. So let's just find anything here. Brick City sounds good. Okay, so we've got a kick drum there. So if we want to merge those kick drums, we can do a whole lot of different.
So you've got full sample editing facilities.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we can change things like, once again, attack, we can change pitch. You can go in, one of my favorite things is the filter, because you've got all these classic Steinberg filters. So things like, bit red, if we really want to make that quite dirty. Go through, change the distortion, and then... it's
nasty.
Really flat. Yeah, really nice filters. So these filters are filters you'd expect to... all of these parameters are things that you'd expect to find within Hellion 5, which is, our flagship sample engine.
So presumably then that it ships with a lot of content as well then?
Yeah.
So samples, patterns. Any idea how big a library...
Okay, well, I installed, when I did a reinstall of this on my computer yesterday, I noticed it was about 8 gig.
Right.
So that's a lot of, in this day and age, that's a lot of drums. And of course, each pad has up to 8 times oversampling. Right.
I know. Is the library made up of one shots, or is there drum loops in there as well?
There's drum loops. So that.
Right.
Okay. So I see what you're saying. Yeah, there are some drum loops. Right. But there's more MIDI content than drum loops.
So the patterns are mostly MIDI based, and then the sort of content. So 8 gig then is a lot.
Yeah, 8 gigs pretty much of one shots. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So how does the mixer kind of structure work? How do we get faders for all the drums?
Of course, yeah. So if you're mixing a drum kit, you'd want to have individual control over each element. So if we go into the mix window, you can see that actually looks like a pretty traditional mixer, except that, of course, when you're recording, say, an acoustic kit, you probably have 14 to 20 microphones, especially if you're expecting, control over the room and over each individual element. So you can see at the moment these are grouped. So the kicks will be grouped into one fader, snares, all that, and so on.
And then there's a macro level going in.
Of course. So you can go and interrogate each individual part.
Right.
Perfect control. But it's a really simple way of mixing.
So jumping out now, there we can see we've got 4 auxiliary sends,
Yep.
but we've also got inserts as well for each.
Yep, so 4 auxiliary sends, we've got inserts. The other thing we've got down the bottom here is an equalizer, so we can go through, turn the equalizer on.
Wow. This is for every channel, yeah.
Yeah, every channel, so even down to each individual element.
Wow.
So if you want to maybe have the blend between your kick inside, your kick outside mic, you can actually, and that's really cool because say, with an envelope shaper, you might actually want a different envelope on the inside kick mic than the outside kick mic.
So this mixer we're looking at all pertains to just the first agent. Can we then kind of go up a level and have a mixer between the four agents?
Yeah, so
the 4 kits, right?
As soon as you go along there, you can see we've got our 4 elements or our 4 different channels, and then you can put effects over the top of that as well.
Okay. Wow.
So you can see we've got
it's getting
nice. So there's nothing on that, but maximizer. So and then you've got your master with another 4 effects over the top.
Wow,
it's a lot of effects.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, we're looking at it standalone here, and like this mixer, I guess, makes sense in a standalone sense. But how does Groove Agent work if we were to run it as a VST within a DAW?
So that's where the fun begins, I think.
Okay.
I mean, this is quite fun on its own, but I think we should. Obviously, I work for Steinberg, so we're going to go and check it out inside of Cubase. But remember, it does work inside other DAWs as well.
Okay.
Voila! Here's one I prepared earlier.
Okay, cool.
But you had a very interesting question there.
Yeah, like I'm a machine user, and when I'm using machine standalone, it's great, and I can sequence. But when I'm trying to sequence it within a DAW, like Cubase, for instance, it's a little bit of a convoluted process. How would you go about sequencing? Some of these patterns that we were seeing earlier.
Yeah, sure.
If you wanted to say bringing Groove Agent into a project that was already existing, and you wanted to sort of bring in those, how would you go about that?
Good question. So there's a couple of different ways we could do it. I could just, first of all, go in and grab my mouse and just draw.
Draw an empty
and then double click on it, and you'll see actually down the left hand side we've got a drum map which represents everything that is in our instrument bank over here.
Okay.
So we could then just grab our pen, basically it's a drumstick, and go on and start entering notes in. That's one way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see we've got the velocity down the bottom. So that's quite an easy way of doing it. And that's an old school Cubase way of doing it.
Yeah.
But this is new integration with Groove Agent 4 because all of the parts on the left-hand side will represent exactly what's going on inside a Groove Agent.
Taking the same names?
Yep. So that's one advantage of actually doing it inside of Cubase.
That's having, presumably, that you set in the drum map to Groove Agent. Is that
right
will that
here.
Automatically do that by inserting a Groove Agent in, then the drum map is all awesome. That's great. That's a real time saver. Yeah. So you know exactly what drum is on what lane. Great.
Exactly. So that's one way of doing it. And of course you could have your hi-hats on one lane, kick on another lane. I find this an interesting way of creating patterns. Let's just drag this window out a bit and let's expand it down the bottom. So this is Beat Designer. So once again, everything on the left-hand side,
the names,
works with Groove Agent. But the nice thing about this is because we just click on our mouse and we move our velocity, Groove Agent has up to 8 different velocity layers.
Right.
So if you really want to get a realistic sounding kick drum or snare drum or something like that, you just want the ghost note, not the goat note. Don't get the goat note.
Don't get the goat note.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, unless you're after a goat note, of course. But you just bring it down and it'll actually move through that velocity sample layering. Okay. And then, of course, we've got different types of swing, so I can change the swing on my kick and on my snare.
So this is using Groove Agent essentially in this form, like a sound module.
Yeah.
And all the sequencing you're doing using, in this case, Cubase's tools. But can you use some of those, like, you were doing the performance things, the jamming mode, and then you were changing the complexity. Can you do that within a DAW and record the output so you could play along, jam along with the track?
Okay, so you can definitely. You can record. I'd need to load up the jam pattern again, but basically you can record it as a MIDI note. So if we just hold it down, it's going to access that one particular pattern. Or you can hit record and you can actually record the automation of your jam as it's going from start to finish.
Right, so you can record it as a performance, as if you were playing a keyboard. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing we've got is drag and drop in between everything in Cubase. And this has been the way for quite some time now. So if we go back and open up Groove Agent.
Yes.
So let's say there's a pattern that we particularly like, but maybe we just want to work on it and we want to work on it very quickly. So we just drag and drop it straight over.
Okay.
And then, whoops, if I hit my zoom in button, there it is there.
Yeah.
So now we can edit that if we want. We can go and say, well, I don't
Yeah.
want that and I don't want that. So really simple edits.
Right. Yeah.
Close that and then
Yeah.
drag and drop straight over and it will replace it.
So yeah, so using the power
Yeah.
of the Cubase sequencer,
Yep.
which is much more scalable perhaps than working within the smaller window of
Yep.
the Groove Agent's own sequencer. Right.
And then you've got the media bay.
Yep.
And I can find some sort of drum pattern and once again just drag and drop everything in between Cubase and, well, that's not liking it.
Yeah.
Oh no, there you go.
Yeah.
So I did it.
Great. So it's bi-directional. You can move
Everything,
things.
yeah. Even from sample to sample, so you can drag a sample straight over onto the beat. So if I
Great.
don't like this particular snare, like if I was recording a session, the first thing I would do is ask the drummer to play 8 different kicks from the lowest articulation to the highest articulation, and I always do that. So I've got a sample of everything
across the whole drum kit.
Because at any point in time, maybe I don't like the actual articulation that he or she's playing. So I would ask them to do that, and then I've got 8 different articulations here. So if I just turn this on, you can see in the background, I've got 8 different samples of a snare.
Yeah.
So I just highlight those, and then I've edited the clip package, and then I can just drop them in here. So now you can see on here I've got my snare replaced, and I can move through different velocity layers.
So clicking at the lower part of the square plays the quietest
velocity,
one,
yeah.
and you can see the sample
Yeah.
moving across as you.
And you can move the change point there.
Right.
So if it's if a drummer's actually playing an electric pad and they want
Yeah.
it to be super realistic, they can just move that around and
Nice. Oh,
works that way.
That's good. Great. So we've seen then that information can flow both ways, patterns and audio. So in terms of the integration, it's pretty complete. So again, the mixing desk that we looked at in the standalone version, presumably you can then integrate that then with the mixing environment in the DAW.
Yeah, so you could mix as a standalone, or if you want, we just go to the mixer, and actually if we go to this new devices, so if we go to VST Instruments, on the left-hand side here, we can see the rack within Cubase, and you can do this in any DAW, but you can activate different outputs.
Right.
An annoying thing sometimes in DAWs is it's actually that it activates all outputs, but if you just want, kick, snare,
You
hats,
can just choose
toms,
the
whatever
output,
it is.
and then they'll come up in the mixer of the software of the DAW itself.
Of course. So then if you go to the actual agent itself, you can change the individual outputs.
You could send the outputs out and send them where you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, or the auxiliaries. So you can have a number of different outputs, and then of course you can start working on the kick sound just within a Cubase mix channel, right here. And then of course with Cubase in terms of integration, you could start working with channel strips.
The channel strip,
whatever. Yeah.
And like after you've put all your inserts on your individual drum, and then you put all your inserts on your drum group, and then you put your inserts on the output, and then you put your you could have.
You can have a lot of channels. You
Yeah.
have a lot of inserts.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can see just how flexible it is. And then, of course, you add the Cubase, the routing possibilities within Cubase and the mixer, and there's a lot of control to be had there. And you don't always need to think of these type of plugins in terms of content, because yes, it does come with a whole lot of content, but then it's also an engineer's dream as well. Because if we were to go to something like a proper drum track here, so you can see I've got a whole kit. There's about 14 channels there. If I didn't like the snare, I could just come into the snare. Let's move it out a little bit. Go into hit points, and of course, change the threshold. So once we've got that done, create MIDI notes. As soon as we create MIDI notes, we could say new MIDI track. But if you have a look over here, dynamic velocity will actually map the velocity that the drum is using.
Fantastic.
Fixed velocity is what I use a lot because we're going to compress it anyway. And if I hit OK, then you can see we've got the MIDI file of what was just played. So if we were then to drag the MIDI file straight up, and I could have just actually...
And then we could drag that and drop it into...
That's now in Groove Agent. Now if we were to open that in Groove Agent, we could mix that with any acoustic snare that we wanted to. So if you really want to beef something up, and it's not just mixing it with any acoustic snare, it's also been able to, let's say a kick drum, it's also been able to mix it with an acoustic kick drum, but also if we wanted to really add some sub, or even a really low synth or something like that, we could just drag and drop that low synth straight over onto the
It's like taking drum replacement to the next level, really, isn't it?
I think so, because it gives you the tools, but also it allows you to shape your own tools and to build your own library and to store whatever you come up with in the media band and have access to it at any particular point in time.
Great. Okay, so it's available now.
Surely is.
And available from the Steinberg store and...
Steinberg web store, all your local dealers have it. So
And how much?
It is £146.
Fantastic. Well, thanks ever so much for coming in to show us that.
Thanks for having me to come in and show you, actually. It's been a pleasure.
So thanks again for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to Sonic State, because we've always got bags of content that I'm sure you'll enjoy. And Andy, thanks once more. And
cheers. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Take care.
See you soon.